Did you know that suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States every single year? 48,000 Americans die by suicide. Now we have COVID. We're in a situation where we are physically isolated from people, and that compromises so many things with mental health. And my guest today is an amazing human being. Her name is Lauren McGlamery. She is an MLSW. She is a life coach. She has been on Quarantine But Cute before, and unfortunately, she has recently lost a very dear person in her life to suicide. So today on the show, we are not just speaking of suicide. We are speaking of grief, of loss, of everything that's happening because of COVID, and even before and then after that. How do we deal with this? It is unprecedented, and we are here to unwrap that. You are welcome to ask questions throughout this entire experience, and thank you for being on the show today. Lauren, she's coming in right now. Hello, everybody just joining.
Hi.
Hello, gorgeous. We both wore stripes. How funny.
I know what it's meant to be. And you are incredible. Like, that whole introduction was just so, I'm so impressed. You've been working really hard. And before we even get started, because I know you'll kind of dip into what we're going to talk about, I wanted to be just so grateful for you, this space. I have chills all over my body because this is not the conversation that many people are chasing right now. Yeah. But it's important, and you are doing so much, and you're spreading yourself across all of the mediums.
Girl,
this is really important. I know, and you are just, it's incredible what you're doing, and I'm just so grateful. So I wanted to just start by that. Like,
you're so sweet. I'm already crying. As soon as you open your mouth, I'm already crying. Like, I'm feeling it today, man.
We are welcoming the tears. I cannot say that I don't know. It's always unpredictable. When you talk about grief, you just never know. So we'll see. But yes, so you're just incredible.
You're so sweet. So let's talk a little bit about what an LMSW is, a little bit of dyslexia there. And I do that a lot. I need to get tested. Let's talk about what you do, and then also as a life coach, and then I believe it's the organization that you work with, that if anyone wants to donate to today during this conversation, I'll pin it in the comments.
That would be great. Yeah. So an LMSW is a licensed Masters of Social Work in South Carolina. It is equivalent to LCSWs in other states. But basically you get a master's degree and you take a test to be licensed and regulated through the state. So I do work in mental health full time. I know I do have a life coaching business focus, but it's really this topic. It's really helping women move through grief, which we experience, as we will talk about, a lot of grief in our lifetime. We just don't acknowledge it as grief.
Right.
Loss. So, but I do work for a mental health resource. It's incredible. It operates under the Clubhouse model. And we see people stay out of the hospital. We see reduction in suicide rates. We see people go from being completely isolated and hopeless to having hope again through offering structure and purpose and work opportunities and going back to school. So it's incredible. It's called Gateway. It's in South Carolina, in Greenville, South Carolina. And yes, the most incredible thing is that it's a nonprofit that has supported its staff 100%. We have not had any furloughs. We have not had pay cuts. And to that, though, we are in need of support from people who are passionate about what we do and want to see it continue. We moved to a new facility that we have built ground up, hand designed for our needs and our purposes on Monday. So we are all very tired,
Yeah. Well, I appreciate
we could use some support.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here, because I know it's a lot, and you've been going a mile a minute, and then you had something happen to you, which you're going to get to in a minute. But in general, we're all just trying to live above water. And it seems to be increasingly harder because there's no middle class anymore, right? Let's just start with that for a second.
Oh,
there's rich and there's poor. And I am poor. Like, I am not going to lie.
Yeah, four.
Yes, I'm privileged and I'm at my parents' house, but I still pay my rent in New York. I still have bills. I still have debt. I'm lucky to have a roof over my head. There's people way worse than me, but that is a big part of why people commit suicide, because of burdensomeness due to economic stress.
Yeah.
And that is now a million times stronger.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the stages of grief, and let's talk about your story, and then how collectively we can all come together in an empathy circle to get through this. And then maybe you can talk about how people can reach out to different places.
Yeah, it's incredible. So the stages of grief, we've talked a little bit about this. I thought that it was, I went to social work school, and we were taught the Kubler-Ross model. It's stage 1 through 5, and I'll read them. It's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. And you thought that you were like, okay, it's point A to point Z,
Right?
like you get there. And you follow this linear pattern, and that's just not true. And you can actually experience all of them. You can experience them in that sequence. You can experience them all at once. You can experience none of them. It's incredible the difference. That grief is so unpredictable. And while there are people who dedicate their lives to make sense of it, which would, thank goodness for those folks, it's just something that you cannot put in a box. Grief and loss. And my story, the most incredible thing is I mentioned Gateway. Actually, like, the person I lost on Juneteenth. He was a man he's from Bolivia, born and raised, came to the US and found my sister, married my sister.
Wow.
And was in my life as a brother-in-law for a long time. They are no longer together. They weren't at the time. And he became my coworker and friend. And so he worked with me. He was an incredible mental health advocate. He had the most passion for people. Oh gosh, I might cry. Living with mental illness, going to get college degrees and getting their education, because we know mental illness disrupts people's education and their career goals. And so he had this fire. He was a fire soul for people going and doing what people told them they couldn't do. And so he, in his last 2 years, he took this like 8-month sabbatical and traveled the world. And he was searching for this life. What's life about? He had this spirit, this love and light, which I actually tattooed on my arm for him in Spanish. So Amari Luz,
Just because it happened.
Because he was such love and light, and he brought it everywhere he went. But he searched for love and light in the world, and he went all over the world, all over South America, came back and said, there is no other place like Gateway. And he spent, it's just like, you could go anywhere. And you came back to this rinky-dink town in South Carolina. It's like a hotbed for COVID, and which was before COVID. But yeah, he just had this incredible heart and soul, and he knew what was important. And he knew Gateway was important, and knew it was changing lives. So it was really, really incredible. It was his whole life. It was his whole life. And then COVID happened. He was an artist. He's a street photographer. I encourage you, Jose E. Zurita. He's incredible.
Will you put that in the comments really quick?
Yeah, let me put it in there. Yeah, because
check out his art.
He has incredible art. He would go around the streets in areas you wouldn't go in our city, and he would photograph homeless folks. He would connect with them. He wouldn't just photograph them. He would know their entire life and their story, and he would spend time with them, and he was incredible. So he was an artist. When COVID happened, it destroyed his hobbies. It was his coping mechanism. There's a couple articles where he said he that's how he dealt with his demons and his inner darkness, because he was a person who suffered with mental illness, as am I. And I think many of us are. If you're watching this, I'm sure that you can find some comfort knowing that we are talking to right?
And side note, it's just never been normalized. Like, we were talking last week, and like, I was in rehab when I was 15 because I was an angsty teenager, and my father had left, but I hadn't, as a child, and I hadn't really computed that. I hadn't really talked to my mom about it. And I think the anger that I had towards her was just coming from the lack of knowledge that that's what was in the back of my head, and I wasn't even realizing why I was behaving the way I was behaving. And it wasn't something you talked about. Like if someone at school found out that so-and-so was at whatever rehab, like you were outcasted. You were the crazy wild girl.
Yeah.
So I kind of got pinned pretty quickly, with that. And it was horrible. People are luckier in a sense today, and we're still trying to normalize trauma and speaking about trauma and PTSD and bipolar disorder, especially even herpes. I mean, my God, like people are so terrified, and it's just like, dude, come on. Like there's so many other things that a person is besides something that they're diagnosed as.
Right. Yeah. And this is what he was so, I mean, when we live with it, we are so passionate about it because we can all share in that. And we are more than the few who label us and put stigma on us. It just is. So the most, but he did, like COVID happened, and then we were going into, he was isolated from his hobbies. He was isolated in general. We were all shut down.
Yeah.
Our work became more incredibly difficult because we couldn't serve people when we're helpers. We couldn't serve in the same way that we could. We all of a sudden were wearing masks and we're standing far away from each other, and we're not in the same environment that we're in. And you lose that human relationship side, which is what our model is so built on. And so he just, over time, the burden became so much. I don't know, I can't speak to his financial situation or anything like that, but he was a person of color, and he was, he's always lived with the stigma. His English was his second language, and he was incredible and smart and brilliant, but yet he struggled because the world, that US, I mean, he loved it and he came back for it, right? But he was still very much passionate about the racism as well, and being an anti-racist, and making sure that his, as he quotes it, his white brothers and sisters were doing that too. So when it got closer to after George Floyd was murdered, he was very impassioned, and he spoke up because we have a couple Black colleagues and coworkers and friends, and we wanted to fight for them, and he was part of that fight. And so that added some stressors and some hopelessness, in this, reopened some of that traumatic feelings.
Well, right? I mean, everything was taken away from all of us overnight. Our freedoms, our joy to just go to the park, just to even walk to your mailbox. Do you know what I mean? You're constantly looking around if someone is coming your way. I mean, it's awful. I mean, and I've said it many times on this show, without my show, I think I would be committed. And I'm not making a joke about that. Like, I need people. I need to connect with people, but not only that, I need to connect people. And I want to give a shout out to Wonderful Wench. She has been a great follower and fan, and was very excited for this conversation. And it sounds like she had been outcasted due to a hospitalization as well. And so let's talk a little bit more about Jose. And I mean, is it something that suicide's so weird, right? It's not something anyone expects, but they say there's warning signs. Like, did you feel like there was something, or was it just complete shock?
Yeah. So I want to speak to, also grief is one of those things that I'm the expert in my grief. I lost my mother in 2017 to breast cancer, which was a totally different experience than this was, because it was this slow, visible, very much like a decline in health, and death was inevitable. I mean, you saw it coming because you could physically see it, and it was visual.
You can prepare, is what you're saying?
Right. Like you can kind of go through some of those stages prematurely before you actually lose someone, while it's still very, very, very difficult. And losing a parent was really difficult at late 20s. But with this one, because I had the advantage of knowing this beautiful trajectory, because I saw him as, over a decade ago, being a person who was older, a non-traditional college student who was in the States, who was going for a degree for the first time and in English. And it was just, he was very insecure, very not sure of himself. And I watched my sister literally save his life the first time, because, it wasn't the first instance of having such a darkness, and actually an attempt, or thoughts or anything like that when it came to suicide and wanting to this life to just be over for him. So it wasn't as, so I knew that I had the advantage of being, you know, a coworker, but it was also like I had to give some space. So I would say that I feel like if you are present, which I've been, I think 2020 and COVID, there is some silver lining in this, is that while it's very difficult, the people I am around, and the moments that I'm in, I'm a lot more present. And there was something there was definitely an odd vibe for me and in this situation. Can you say that across the board? Absolutely not. There are times when you just can't. You can't see it coming. And you know what? I racked my brain, and I for some reason the moment led me, and my voice and my words came out, and I was able to have a closure moment with him that the day. It was Juneteenth, which is where I was kind of leading with, I don't know if that was a purposeful thing, but in this summer, and Juneteenth being the day that it is, lit another fire for me, and being an advocate for people of, you know, Black people in this country.
And also his trajectory in COVID going, I need to speak out as a person of color, and just as a human being. So you saw him be so positive about getting the word out, and then it's like, gone.
Yeah. So the baton, he always said, he talked about Chaskeys. And so he said that there were messengers who ran across South America and across countries to take messages from one area, one region to another, in times before you had even horses or anything. Like, people who ran millions of, hundreds of miles. And he always talked about the Chaskeys. That's what they're called. So look them up. It's a very interesting and very inspiring story. And he was a Chasky. And so he challenged us, and he left us with this Chasky message of carrying mental illness. And I do think that if I didn't come into places like this, and, I don't want to be the person who's on this show talking about being a survivor of suicide, because I didn't even know I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know, but I am. And I think that was something we were going to talk about, is some of this language around suicide. But anyway, he gave me a message to carry. And part of it is breaking the stigma and making it less taboo, and showing what it really looks like to grieve and mourn someone who has gone through this horrible, cancerous illness, that doesn't always inevitably end in death. It doesn't always end up like this, but for some it does. And it's a public health issue and crisis.
It's a public health crisis. I mean, mental health is a public health crisis. And sadly, I think it all stems from money in a lot of ways. Money and acceptance and validity. And I've battled my own demons, as we all have as humans. We've all thought about it at some point. Just even thinking about what is that like? Maybe not thinking, oh, I'm going to do it. But, I can't speak for billions of people, but I can say that it's something that I've thought about before, wondering, would anyone care? What's my legacy going to be? And does that matter if we're a blip in space? I mean, your mind thinks, I think, something upwards of 70,000 thoughts a day. So you can spiral out if you don't have support. So in addition to, R.I.P. Jose, he sounds like he was
incredible,
an incredible person. And you had told me that he had watched the show of us the first time you were on, which makes me very emotional.
He did. And he posted it on our Gateway Slack the next day. And he was so proud. Because the last time, it was similar. I mean, it was a different topic, of course, because we weren't talking, I hadn't experienced this before, but I'm telling you, he did that. It wasn't just for me. It wasn't just for one person. Literally everyone. He had everything to give to everyone else. And so where it landed is that, and this isn't true for everybody. It's not, but for his case, he loved himself out. He didn't love himself, but he loved everyone so much that he emptied everything he had for everyone. I mean, he would send people random YouTube videos of songs, and they were not mass things. They were specifically picked for that person in that day and that time. I mean, he had the capacity to love so much, but he did not do that for himself first because of that hurt and the trauma that we all, so, we have our own levels, but he had trauma that he just couldn't tap into. And He was 40. He was almost about to be 40. So it's
Wow.
just think
He
about the
looked so
time.
young.
Beautiful, beautiful human being. And he just, I think about the time that he grew up, and he was 10 years older than me. And it is different in my age group. And then obviously, like, as we continue forward, I hope it continues to be more and more different of a conversation, and it is more open. Like you sharing that you have had thoughts of like, man, what if I just, that's not abnormal. And for our whole lives we were told it was. And it only becomes dangerous when you're told that it's not normal and to not talk about it. That's when it becomes really dangerous. And the same with grief. Grief holds on much longer in the grief. So there's grief and mourning. If you aren't able to mourn, which is an outward expression, and sometimes if you're an introverted and inward person, that's how it kind of portrays itself. But you have to mourn. And if you're not in an environment that supports you in mourning, and it could be the loss, like what we're talking about, the serious loss of a loved one, but it's also your job, your future plans, your career, your financial security, your health care, because in our country, fucking health care is tied to your job. And it's like all of this stuff that we have experienced in COVID, which is why we decided to talk about this in like a kind of a package deal, is that we are so talking about loss, and we have to be able to openly mourn it in the same scale, the same way. So I just wanted to touch on like COVID being something that is it's taken this future thinking and all these like hopes and dreams that we had for the year. I mean, I had like so many weddings to go to and all this stuff that is such a privilege to be able to do. And it hurt. I mean, that's just like the first thing I can think.
All my friends are married now. I'm 37. I'm gonna die all day.
But you have like you're in your city. You totally moved down to freaking Georgia.
Well, now I'm temporarily here, but it's like a temporary thing. I still have my apartment. They will have to pry my body out of that rent stabilized apartment. I will never leave it. But the fact that I have to even think, let's just address that. The fact that I have to even think that I've got to pry my hands from something just shows you the state of our world.
Yes.
Not just America. People struggle everywhere, as we all know. But, just America is supposed to be this incredible country, and it is in a lot of ways. I'm not an expatriate by any means. Already in my mind, sometimes I want to go to Costa Rica, but, we have to disrupt the system. There's a revolution coming, and part of that starts with mental health.
Yes. So that's what we're kind of touching on, why this is such a dangerous place, this whole system. As we're acknowledging, I know the conversation, and if you're watching from the United States and you're watching from across the world, you know that the United States system is being highlighted as having some serious structural flaws, and this foundation that we've been building on has only supported a small few. And
white men.
Right. Yes. I am radical. So if we want to, I will be the radical person I am. And actually, COVID 2020, I was like, 2020 vision. That's not exactly the vision I had for myself, because I've become radical as hell. But I'm like, I don't mean this in a way, but oftentimes I kind of jokingly say, like, burn it down, burn it down.
The
FBI
can come knock on my door. I don't care.
Yeah. The housing, not having a secure hope. So like you even having to say, like you were mentioning, that you're worried about, like, what if they can uproot me from my apartment, and even though I'm paying, like, it's all that distant worry, like this future worry it is killing people, because I know that suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States.
Right.
But what about the complications of that? And actually I looked up statistics, and there's speculations that there typically it's about 40,000 a year in the US that die of suicide. And then they said that they don't have any data yet, but due to COVID and this whole pandemic, the ripple effect could be 75,000 people die
I mean, it's going to be massive. And for anyone joining, you know, I know we're in a very deep part of the conversation. We're talking about grief, loss, COVID, suicide. Lauren McGlamery is here. She's an MLSW in South Carolina and also a life coach. And these are big topics. And, you know, the social isolation factor and the feeling of hopelessness is what scares me. And, you know, we have all these incredible medical health care workers that are literally losing their lives to save others. Mm-hmm. But then in addition to that, you know, let me tell you, my therapist is booked. So I got to keep my standing appointment every Sunday. But I highly recommend, even if you don't feel like you have a problem or an issue, to go and speak to someone, because it just kind of feels good to like not do the phone tree, is what me and my therapist call it, where I have a moment and I'm like, I got to call everybody and get all their opinions.
Yes.
And from that, I deduct,
yeah.
reduce, I don't know what the word is. I come up with the answer because I want to be justified and validated for why I'm angry or why I lashed out. So can we talk about that for a minute, about having just support outside of social media? Because even though I love social media, I know you guys see me on all the time, but I get to the point where I am so depleted, even though I'm energized by what I'm doing, which is a good sign.
Yeah.
I have to step away from my own mental health, because then I start comparing myself to others. And then that starts leading, you know, comparison is poison, right? I always say that. And then it starts leading you down a path. And I'm not saying that's leading me down the path to thinking of committing suicide or something, but you can get really dark. So let's talk about how we work on taking breaks, how we reach out if we don't think we have an issue, but maybe we don't need to call mom, dad, brother, uncle Joe, you know, or all your friends. And maybe talk with a professional. Let's talk about what that takes, the toll it takes on others when you unload, even if you're meaning well.
Yes. So the board of directors at Gateway gifted us a book that was called Understanding Your Suicide Grief by Dr. Alan Wolfeld. And it is an incredible resource of anybody who is wanting to deep dive into specifically suicide grief, but also grief in general. And also it talks about a little bit about why we do that denial thing and why we kind of push things away and why we avoid pain. So it says, I pulled it out because I wanted to talk about it.
Great.
It says, in our culture, pain and feelings of loss are experiences most people try to avoid. And it says, why? Because the role of pain and suffering is misunderstood in our culture. So a lot of these hokey, you know, you hear all these, like, I'm such a, you know me, I'm very type A. I'm very much like a very determined, organized person, right? So that's me. Pain, I'm like, nope, pain, nope. Like,
yeah. You fight through it.
Fix it on, right? And I go head on into stuff, which is why I think that I've been challenged and I guess called to do this, because I do go into things head on that are hard and difficult. So like grief and talking about and uncomfortable conversations. However, for us, we avoid pain. So we will go through any length, like that telephone tree, for an example, as one thing, to not feel discomfort or pain, because we are conditioned to think that that's what we're striving to do. Whereas most people, if you talk to most people who are like, you know, reaching their fullest potential and they're in their happiest states, they're like, I meditate, I stay present, I really pay attention to my body, I have awareness in my body. I want to use an example kind of off the path because it's a little lighter topic, but it's still controversial. It's talking about like women on hormonal treatments. There's a lot of women who I've talked to in this conversation. It's kind of amazing what things come up, but it was just talking about how we were all conditioned to think that it was just like, here's the pill, right? So it's oh, I'm here and I'm emotional or whatever. We're conditioned to think that is the answer, instead of hold on, assess for a couple of months, come back to me and tell me what's going on. Maybe it's this or that, or it's a quick fix. I want to avoid pain.
Room. You've got to give yourself room. And I tell you what, I'm 37, but I always felt like an older soul. I always felt very self-aware. But even 10 years ago, I don't have the capacity and awareness I have now. You know why? Because I had to work at it. And people are afraid to work at it. Men, women, doesn't matter. It's not even about that. It's because of even just people making fun of self-help books.
Yeah.
That is such a stigma.
Yeah.
Okay? So if we can take off the word self-help and just talk about how we need to have an empathy circle of love and be able to say the things that we want to say without someone going, oh, you've got a problem because you bought like 8 books and look, none of them worked. You're still an asshole. Like, you know, whether that's the person on your shoulder in your mind saying that or someone in front of you, that's another stigma. It's so deeply rooted, just like racism.
So deep.
It's not just one thing that you can tick off and go, oh, well, we figured it out. We cracked the box on mental health. We cracked the code on racism. Like, it's so systemically deep. You know? I know she said nice bro voice.
I love Wonderful Wench so much.
I didn't know I went into bro voice, but thank you.
Yeah. I do want to point out, I had a kind of a revolutionary conversation with somebody the other day because I'm no longer an assimilationist. I'm very much anti-racist. I'm very much like, I just kind of blended in for a while, and I was in that, like, I don't want to be polarizing. I don't want to challenge anybody. But I had this conversation the other day, and I asked the question, we were talking about experiences with eating disorders and body image. And I know you have a talk coming hopefully later in the coming weeks that we can hear from you. But we were talking about that, and I just stopped and I said, who benefits from you feeling that way? And I challenge everybody who's listening, if you're feeling some type of way, who benefits from your negative feeling? Because if we're talking about mental health, it's an insurance company thing. It could be someone who wants you to get the quick fix. If it's a body image thing, it's usually a quick fix diet or a diet pill or plastic surgery or whatever it is. And whatever you do, that's your decision. But who benefits is a great question to start asking yourself when you're feeling that way, to do what you're saying, like kind of sit in that and start to have that self-awareness of like, I now know that wokeness is starting to be a negative thing, or like a polarizing word, or some sort of negative thing. But wokeness is really just being aware of what is, you are not just one person. You are a tiny little bit in a system that is built not for you. It's not built for us.
And everyone says words don't matter. Remember, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Well, that's the dumbest damn thing anyone ever said.
I'm going to be honest. I've only heard white men say that. When I was growing up, it was always white men saying that. They're still saying it, and I'm just like,
it's just, again, it's a systemic thing we're taught in school. Well, don't worry about what someone else was saying. Well, but yeah, I am, because it's hurtful. And our words are so important. I mean, look at who our president is. I mean, my God, I just don't even want to go there, but we all know. And so we need leaders. We need people to stand up and talk about these things. We need to take a breath for ourselves. And I'm so hard on myself. And through this show, I've learned to relax and in ways that, even though I'm busy, I am taking time for myself, which is a journey I was already on before COVID, but really taking the time to not have to say yes to everything. It was almost FOMO, but it was more of like, I don't want people to forget about me, so I've got to be in your face.
Yeah.
That's where that came from. And that's a grief and a loss in and of itself, because you're like, okay, I got to step back and like, am I losing something of myself if I do that? Am I being too intense? Is my show annoying? Do I put too many promos out there? And then it's like, I hear people message me that have been like, oh my God, you've helped me so much, or oh my God, this, or oh my God, that. We can turn in all these insecurities into something positive. So to that effect, how can we do that? How can we go from the loop of, I'm not good enough, I feel like no one's listening to me, I don't like the way that person talked to me, but I'm afraid to speak up. What do we do?
Yeah.
To get over that hump?
I'm curious if people will comment anything, if they're watching you, anything that they have. I like that you were talking about an empathy circle. It sounds like a trusted group of people. I usually call it an advisory council because, again, I'm very type A, and I'm very like, but I also, advisory council. But the purpose of an advisory council, it kind of sounds kind of like I'm still very independent and in control, but they'll advise me to do, it's just my thing. But
just be in my empathy circle, and we'll secretly call it the advisory council.
Yeah.
No, it's great. I'm joking.
But I love that. I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's what I'm thinking is like, what I did this year, and one of the byproducts, whether it's forced or not, was to reduce my influence. Things that were coming in, and I actually had this just today. Was talking about this. My coworker, one of my best friends, she was talking about this crazy vivid dream that she had that was just like had these little bits of like my sister was in the dream, and it was because I think it was because I was on the phone with her yesterday and she just happened to be around. But it's like your brain, like you were talking about, your brain absorbs everything, and it shows it.
If that was possible, if it actually only absorbs like 20%, but if it absorbed everything, our brains would explode. Anyway, fun fact.
Right. So, well, yeah, I try not to speak in absolutes because none of it, absolutes aren't true. But
I'm just being a smart ass.
It's incredible. You're welcome here. But the point being that she did not even consciously take that information in, and all of a sudden my sister's in her dream. I mean, it's just incredible that you have to really do the work to guide your influences, cut out things that are not good for you. Sometimes it's like some people put limits on social media because it's a like something that they can only do in doses, and that's great. That's why the overwhelming population said, hey, look, there's a reason that Instagram and iPhone and all these apps put time limit features on there, is because the overwhelming population was saying we're addicted. And so they did this step to help kind of support people who were kind of coming out of that or needed that kind of support. So it's just an incredible thing that we're not alone, and these things aren't just done at random. So it just speaks to your like tone. You must have an influence physically, like people you actually trust, and you have to check in this world, in this day and age, your virtual influences. Like, who are you listening to?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's hard to police yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's getting an extra slice of cake, guilty, or getting an extra glass of wine, guilty, or speaking to somebody who isn't going to benefit you, but you're lonely, guilty. Those people don't serve you. Sometimes it's better. Those people and things don't always serve you. Yeah. I'm not shaming myself because I like cake, or I like wine, or I like a boy who doesn't like me back. Not currently, but in the past. Mm-hmm. I don't like anyone right now. I like myself. But, we all have these crutches, if you will. And it comes from what we were talking about. And this is my unprofessional opinion. This is my life experience. And it comes with just life not wanting to be alone. Yeah. So no wonder self-isolation and COVID is causing suicide numbers to skyrocket. Yeah. It's science, and we need people, and we need to create empathy circles. I've never said that word before today, but I'm creating it and coining it.
I think you should coin it. Yep.
I think we need to start maybe a Facebook group, even though I'm not really on Facebook, but empathy circle, and check in, and have people check in. Even if they show up, like I used to do in rehab, they would make you point to this is before Facebook, anything. This is the 90s. I mean, God, I feel like I'm 70 the way I'm speaking, but it feels like so long ago. So every day you would wake up in rehab. I was there for clinical depression, whatever. And there was sheets of paper on the wall, and it was every different kind of emotion. And you would have to point to, like, I'm angry today. Mm-hmm. I'm jealous today. I'm annoyed today. And at the time I thought it was the dumbest thing ever. But now I literally just understand that all they were doing was trying to help us teenagers work through the emotion without necessarily having to just like spill it all out, because it's not so easy. Not everybody's as open as me and you. You can't just crack everybody's shell open by saying everyone should be talking about mental health. It's like, I don't want to say that to people being righteous that I've gone on my journey and I'm where I'm at now. All I can do is speak about my experience and hope that it encourages someone else to either get help, make a phone call, say something to someone that they need to let go of, or not say anything at all. Guess what? You don't owe anyone an excuse, honey, if they're hurting you. Mm-hmm. I mean,
yeah.
So let's talk about ways people can deal with their grief and what you do specifically with that.
Yeah. I love, because I want to say one thing about my lived experience, because I do think that it is part of the professional experience, is having some of that lived experience to offer, because you can only guide someone as far as you've been or be empathetic to it, right? So I listen to Nora McInerney. She has a couple books out and a TED Talk that's incredible, but she talks about the difference between clean pain and dirty pain. And dirty pain is this kind of pain we inflict on ourselves, whether it's an internal monologue, it's a for me, it was body image. It was very, 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 very hard and critical on my body. And if my worthiness, my value, my successes were all based on my body. So that's dirty pain, right? And then, which drove my depression even deeper. I had depression, and then this drove it deeper. And then you have clean pain, which is death. Traumatic, very unexpected losses, like losing someone that you love. And so back in 2017, I didn't choose to become woke. I didn't choose to become more aware. I didn't choose to have to go into doing the work. I had to do the work because
after your mom,
I had no other, after losing mom, I had no other option. And right now, it's with this pandemic, as it's gone on longer and longer in our country, we are at a crossroads. And I've heard a lot of people in my work, in my life, and women I speak with and coach and guide. And it's like, okay, this is almost like that clean pain break, where it's like, I've lost all of this stuff and I'm realizing all of this loss. And now I have no other choice but to work through it and make some sort of sense of this. So I do think that there's different kinds of pain, and we just think pain is pain, and it's not true. So that's kind of my thing, is like, I was really forced into it. And would I choose it any other way? No. Would I love to have my mom here? Sure. But I do think that I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't be doing the work. I wouldn't be doing the work if it weren't for some sort of tragic loss. But what I was going to speak to about my job, what Gateway does is, it is built on this principle of we are not alone. It was a group of people who were living in New York City, like I talked about last time on the show, back in the 40s, like 30s and 40s. And they met together, and they were patients of hospitals, and they kept, cycling in and out, and they were just really drugged up and, medicated. And so they were just sick of this never ending cycle of revolving door going in the hospital and being sick. And so they met together, and they formed an empathy circle, is essentially what they formed. And they said, you know what, we've got to do something about this. And so they started meeting at certain times, giving themselves like some structure and some purpose, accountability with one another, and lived experience, sharing it with each other. And the first thing that they tackled was loneliness. It wasn't go to get a job. It wasn't go back to school. It wasn't find a home. They solved loneliness first. And then the Clubhouse model came from that point. It wasn't because we were here to serve. I mean, yes, you have your hierarchy of needs, as some people may not know, but usually they do. You have to do things like make sure you have a roof over your head is one of those major needs that you really can't address and be, get to this like point of healing unless you have a home. It's very difficult to do that when you don't know where you're going to sleep at night. And so they didn't start there, though. They started with loneliness. They connected with each other. They had relationships. So I wanted to affirm and validate that, yes, I think that as humans, you can't have one thing without the other. You can't just have your needs met and not have loneliness solved.
Right. And there's so many introverts that say, well, I like being alone, and I can't speak for them, but in a way I'm an extrovert introvert, and I do like my private time, but I do give myself so much socially that it's not an issue. Mm-hmm. But I worry about my introvert friends that have so much trouble, or maybe not trouble, maybe that's a bad word. Maybe, see, this is where we have to think about our words. Language. Maybe it's just not their style to tell everyone everything. And so a lot of those kinds of personalities hold it in so deep. And that's what scares me, because it's like you want to be there for someone, but if they're not telling you what's wrong, you're never going to know. And it's like, we're not Superman. We can't save everybody, because that's just not how life works, no matter if it's suicide or an accident or a cancer or, it's just sadly not the way life works. But I want, as in talking to you, I want to at least put the idea bubble out there of how, in your professional opinion, we can reach everybody on a universal level without stepping too far into people's personal space, but also making it available to where they feel they can be vulnerable enough while being protected to come to someone and say, I need help.
Yeah, it's very difficult because in the system that we were in, we were so far down the rabbit hole of, like I said, healthcare access is attached to your job most times, or you have to pay out of pocket, which puts more strain on you. But healthcare does not support the entire body, so the healthcare is so limited for mental health. You said your psychiatrist, therapist is booked.
Oh, he's so busy because of COVID.
Yeah.
It's everybody needs a third party other than someone close to them
Right.
to speak. And it's so, that's the one thing I can promote from experience is my personal relationships are better because I have a therapist, not because my therapist and I are working through a subject or an issue, but I have a better relationship because I'm not always offloading my grief and loss on my loved ones. And even though you say, oh, well, they're supposed to be there for me. No. It doesn't work like that.
No.
Because you don't want them to be a punching bag or even sometimes a sounding board.
Yeah.
You know, so it's very important, in my opinion, to go see someone like you who gives people that third party perspective. And it is huge. Shannon just said it's huge. It is huge.
And I was gonna say, I've likened it to, like, if you broke a bone, would you just trust anybody to take care of to set your bone? No, you're not gonna do that. I spent 6 years in college and graduate programs. I have been working for Gateway going on 8 years. I've dedicated my entire life and lived experience, and my every thought goes to humans. How can we better make it a better life, better quality of life for humans? That's my thing. And there's many more people out there like me who want to do this. And there's so many who are in specific niches, who like can go down into, like you said, they'd be the perfect fit for someone who might be this specific personality type. Because I'm gonna say the other thing I wanted to point out that I learned in that book that was gifted to us, they talk about some of these whys about grief and how we grieve that way. And there was one specific thing about your unique personality. So it was saying that, like, if you are whatever personality type, then you're going to grieve in a way that's very representative of that type. And so we're not, because you and me are different, like we kind of are that kind of mixed state where we're very extroverted, but also need some time alone. That doesn't mean, like, the extroverts, when those number 7s on the Enneagram scale, when the COVID quarantine happened, they all shut down. I mean, it was like everybody, I couldn't understand it because I'm not the same. And I was like, why is it so hard for you? Like, just stay home. And they were like, but it's so hard for me to stay home. And I didn't understand. But there are people who specialize in, like, can be that person. There's so many that are, you have to find the right fit. And I understand that, but sometimes you have to just start. Because I think that for me personally, it was, I'll never find the right fit. Like, I don't know if I don't have the time. Right now, everyone is doing virtual and they're planning on keeping it. So that's number one. Yeah. And that's a good thing.
Come out of telemedicine.
Right. Yes, telemedicine. Thank you. Like, very, like, protected, safe, not like this, not like FaceTime, but like they're doing it. So COVID kind of forced them into coming to the age for mental health, and they're keeping it a lot of the time. So that's great because that ups their capacity and brings down their costs so they can actually serve more people. So that's great. And just try. I've heard, like, I was just listening to podcasts. I haven't tried BetterHelp. There's some apps out there that are like,
I have used BetterHelp.
So wait, do you know anything? I thought that might be a good resource for people to tap into.
BetterHelp is a great app. I went through a few therapists, and I ended up finding a therapist through the Actors Fund, who I love, Bobby, who's been on the show.
He's great.
Many times. And he and I met, and luckily he took my insurance. And with BetterHelp, I don't think they do, or they take certain kinds, but they didn't take mine. And you have to pay out of pocket. So it's not as beneficial for a lot of people. But I think if you don't have insurance, I think right now with COVID, so many states, especially like New York, they're not only offering like childcare, they're offering like more than just suicide hotlines. I think they're actually offering like a mental health hotline. I don't have that information. I need to look that up.
I have the national one.
Let's put that in the comments and pin it? That
Yeah. I'm having trouble pinning, but the other thing I wanted to offer that I found out is that hospice companies and funeral homes do offer grief and bereavement counseling, but not just that. I think in COVID, they're actually, and they may have been doing this longer than I know of, but they are offering just counseling. Anybody who's stressed or struggling, or because, like I said, they acknowledge that grief and loss is bigger.
Totally.
So they are also local places are doing that too. I'm going to tag this hotline.
Yeah, tell me the number. I'm ready. It's the National Suicide Hotline.
Okay, National Suicide Hotline is 1-800-273-8255. That is the, I guess you call that one. And then there is a text line as well.
Great. And then today, you're definitely spitting facts that people are loving. Gateway SC is the Instagram. If people want to donate to this nonprofit, unfortunately, we don't have a fundraiser button because it's a smaller outfit than some of these larger fundraisers, which totally understandable. There's so many great organizations out there. They can click on Gateway SC and then follow the link to the website and donate even $1, right?
Yes, please. I mean, anything helps. We really are, like I said, Jose's one of his biggest passions in life was Gateway in general, but we really are, we're helping someone get their master's degree right now, like one of the first people, and he's doing it in COVID. And I mean, tuition assistance, making sure these folks, that's the biggest barrier he's got, and he's going into the mental health field, which is incredible. So just stuff like that's where your money does not go to my pocket. It actually does go into services and supports. And we've been going for 36 years. We plan to continue for another 30, 80, like we're here. So any little bit helps. Yeah.
Love it. Thank you so much, Lauren, for coming on the show today. If there's anything you want to say before you go about Jose or about your work and how people can reach you, please let us know.
Yeah, I do want to leave you with just some positive thoughts, to say that many times we get stuck in this fear and loss and what ifs, and you always wonder, after someone's gone, after you've lost someone, you always wonder, and you start to think about, what would I do? Why, how would I talk to that person? How can I be better? Like it does propel you forward, but you don't have to wait. And I think that right now, my biggest thing is to find something that's your passion. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to be passionate about everything, but find something that you're passionate about. Be present in conversations. Enjoy silence. Don't shy away from pain. Lean into the discomfort, and come out. I just got chills somewhere. And come out the other side, because people are looking for you to do that. People are looking for you to lead the way. So if you are on this call, or you happen to watch it on the rewatch or something later, you didn't just stumble into this by chance. Your heart has something to say. You have messages. You have people in your life, or who are coming into your life, who need you to be present. And that's all you have to do. And that's enough. And a lot of us, honestly, I also wanted to say, you're doing enough. I don't even know you, but I know that I need to hear that more. And it's been happening a lot in our workplace. It's like, you're serving enough. You're doing enough. You are enough. So please know you are enough. You're doing enough, and you have enough. And yeah, I hope that, anytime you can reach out to me, my Instagram is open. My DMs are open. Like, I look at them all the time. I'm like, really, what a call to be a part of. So I'm here, and thank you for holding space for this. You're incredible. I want to close circle. And Suzanne, hey, Sue. Yeah, I always look forward to these calls, and you doing this is so great. So support Quarantine But Cute. I bought my t-shirt. It is shipped. I'm ready for it. I wanted to close on a high note. Like, go get your apparel so you can rock it, people.
It's in the link in my Instagram on Linktree. So I launched another campaign. I think it ends in 8 days. And then I'm going to do sweatshirts in the fall, I think.
I love it. And your logo is great. And you are just, you're just trailblazing so many conversations, and so many people are benefiting. And I'm just really grateful for you.
You're so great. I'm grateful for you. I'm virtually hugging you. Let's
Yes.
do a virtual empathy hug.
Everybody breathe.
We're such hippies.
I'm so excited. And we know we really are. Like, we didn't plan this, and I love it
We
so
did
much.
not plan.
Lauren's, yeah. So yes, thank you. And everyone just keep supporting Lauren. It's amazing. And yeah.
Thank you guys so much for watching Quarantine But Cute. Lauren McGlamery, live from South Kakalaki. You guys can rewind this, watch the grief COVID loss, and there's some laughs in there and some serious stuff too. So thank you so much for coming on the show today, and I will talk to you soon, probably right after this.
Bye.